a simple woman, was rejected from an AI conference for being not qualified enough. But just minutes later, she made the entire tech world rise to their feet, not because of her appearance, but because of the brilliance they had dismissed. The ideal morning sun glinted off the glass towers of downtown San Francisco as thousands of attendees poured into the Nexus AI Global Conference, the most prestigious artificial intelligence symposium in the country. Inside the gleaming Moscone Center, suits, lanyards, and sleek designer laptops moved in practiced unison. CEOs, researchers, and tech influencers clustered in polished groups, exchanging jargon and business cards as camera crews panned across the crowd. And then there was Rachel Evans. She stepped off the Muni line 2 blocks away, her hoodie pulled snug against the morning chill. A worn canvas backpack hung over her shoulder, a sticker peeling off the side that read, "Root GUI." She wasn't dressed like a speaker or sponsor or startup founder. Her jeans were faded at the knees and her sneakers had seen more code, labs and bus stops than boardrooms. At 32, Rachel looked like the kind of person people overlooked, and they often did. She paused at the base of the steps leading to the center's grand entrance. Her fingers brushed the inner pocket of her backpack, where a neatly folded paper invitation rested. Not an official speaker pass, no. Those were reserved for the Ivy Leaguers and funded startups. But a colleague from an online open-source forum had quietly submitted one of her algorithms to a Nexus-affiliated demo contest. It had placed third, an unexpected feat that had earned her a digital entry badge and a seat in the audience. She had traveled overnight by bus from a small town in Iowa. She hadn't come for attention. She'd come to learn, and perhaps, just maybe to be heard. Rachel approached the registration booth inside, holding out her phone with the QR code. Behind the desk, a woman in a fitted black blazer and perfect blowout glanced at it, then at Rachel's hoodie, and frowned. "I'm sorry," the woman said flatly. "Tech support for vendors is through the lower entrance off Folsom Street." Rachel blinked. "Oh, I'm not with tech support. I have a registration for today's keynote panels." She offered the phone again, her voice calm but quiet. Woman didn't take it. Behind her, a tall man with gelled hair and a Nexus staff badge chuckled under his breath. "She's serious?" he muttered to his colleague, not bothering to lower his voice. "I mean, did someone invite a barista?" Rachel heard. She was used to hearing. The receptionist finally took the phone with 2 fingers, barely glancing at the screen. "This QR code is for our public access gallery," she said curtly. "Not for the reserved sessions." She gestured toward a side hallway. "That section is mostly exhibits and posters. The main floor is for premium registrants." "I was told this code would grant me access to the security demo," Rachel said. "I'm a contributing developer." The receptionist cut her off with a sigh. "Ma'am, if you have concerns about our system, you can email the help desk. Right now we're prioritizing actual attendees." Rachel's lips pressed into a thin line. Her posture remained polite. She stepped aside and took out a printed copy of her submission email. But before she could show it, a voice called out from nearby. "Well, well, what do we have here?" She turned. Kyle Merritt stood a few feet away, flanked by 2 younger engineers in branded black jackets. He was one of the keynote speakers for today's event, a rising star in AI security. At 29, Kyle had already been profiled in Wired and was known for his signature swagger and viral Twitter threads. Rachel recognized him instantly. Kyle didn't recognize her. She had replied to 3 of his public bug bounties on GitHub in the last 2 years. He had dismissed each one without response, but now, seeing her standing there with her weathered backpack and soft-spoken tone, he grinned like, he just found a new inside joke. "Let me guess," he said, loud enough for a small group nearby to hear. Trying to crash the party with some fan fiction code, huh? His friends laughed. One of them took out a phone and pretended to zoom in on Rachel's hoodie. Are we doing a cosplay thing now? He joked. Root girl, queen of open source, Rachel. Didn't flinch. I submitted a script that exploited a vulnerability in the ConvoBot 7 API. It was flagged by your team in March. I never got a follow-up. Kyle's smile twitched. You think you found something in my code? He scoffed. That API is in active use by 5 Fortune 500 clients. But sure, maybe we missed something, or maybe... You misread the protocol documentation. Rachel met his gaze evenly. Maybe. Kyle leaned in slightly. Tell you what, if you think you're smarter than everyone here, why don't you prove it later? We're hosting a live security demo at 2 p.m. Bring your laptop, show us what you've got. His tone was mocking, but Rachel only nodded. I will. As she turned to leave, Jessica, the receptionist, called after her, sarcasm dripping from her voice. Enjoy the exhibits, Ms. Evans. Rachel didn't answer. She stepped into the side hall and walked toward the back of the building where rows of folding chairs and startup posters lined the walls. No velvet ropes, no cameras, but there was Wi-Fi. She found an empty seat near an outlet, unzipped her backpack, and powered up the same laptop she'd used every day for the past 5 years. The screen flickered on, the code editor still open to the last line she'd written on the overnight bus. She opened a new terminal and began typing, because what they didn't know yet was that Rachel Evans didn't come here to attend a conference. She came to rewrite it. By early afternoon, the main auditorium of the Nexus AI Global Conference pulsed with anticipation. Hundreds of neatly arranged chairs faced a towering LED screen. Spotlights glowed. Screens blinked. The agenda was clear. A headline demo by Kyle say, Merritt, Silicon Valley's golden boy and rising star of AI security, featuring his latest brainchild, the Turing 7 system, which he'd claimed was unbreakable by any known human or artificial method. On the screen behind the stage, bold text shimmered, Turing 7, unbreakable, unbreachable, unmatched. At exactly 2 p.m., Kyle took the stage to applause and camera flashes. Dressed in a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled just enough to reveal a high-end smartwatch, he radiated ease and authority. He spoke like a man certain of his place, confident, clever, rehearsed. Thank you all for being here, he said, scanning the crowd of journalists, engineers, and venture capitalists. Today you're about to witness what we believe is the most secure AI system ever built. The result of 2 years, 50 engineers, and a few million in R&D. Scattered applause. Kyle smiled, then added, as if offhandedly, and just to make things fun, we've got a little challenge. If anyone here believes they can break through even one layer of our firewall, just one, you're welcome to try. Live, right now. Chuckles followed. Phones rose. Most assumed it was a rhetorical stunt. No one would dare stand up. No one was supposed to. Then came a calm voice from the back of the room. I'll try. Heads turned. Rachel Evans was standing. She wore the same gray hoodie from that morning, the same faded jeans, the same old backpack slung over one shoulder. Her laptop was heavy with stickers and duct taped at the hinge. She didn't look like a speaker. She didn't look like she belonged, but she didn't flinch. The moderator blinked, unsure. Excuse me, are you on the demo list? No, Rachel said evenly, but he said anyone could try. The room tensed, murmurs rippled. A few in the front rows exchanged smirks. From his place on stage, Kyle Merritt leaned slightly forward. Oh, he said, you are again. Rachel nodded once. Kyle forced a laugh, masking his irritation with mock charm. All right then. We're nothing if not inclusive. Bring up Your laptop and let's see what you've got. A few people laughed. Some pulled out their phones to record, sensing drama. Rachel stepped onto the stage. She didn't smile. She didn't hesitate. She plugged her laptop into the HDMI cable, took a breath, and opened her terminal window. No flashy GUI. No third-party hacking tools. Just her. Lines of code filled the screen. This, Kyle said to the crowd, is the live core of Turing 7. 7 adaptive AI firewalls. No one, not even our internal teams, has ever breached Gate 3. But hey, we're open to miracles. Rachel didn't respond. Her fingers were already moving. Gate 1 blinked. Bypassed. Polite murmurs. Not bad, someone whispered. Probably. Luck Gate 2. Bypassed. The room quieted. Eyes locked on the main display. Kyle shifted slightly, a crease forming between his eyebrows. Then, Gate 3. The one no one had ever passed. 30 seconds. Then a minute. Then, bypassed. A gasp spread through the room like static. Up front, Dr. Helen Watanabe, legendary researcher from MIT, leaned forward, her eyes narrowed in sudden, keen interest. She's not attacking it, the professor murmured. She's reading it. Kyle's jaw tightened. Rachel's hands never stopped. She moved like a musician, calm, fluid, efficient. Gate 4 fell, then Gate 5, then 6. Kyle moved toward the server panel. This could crash. She's not crashing anything, someone said. She's rewriting protocol in real time. Rachel paused, then typed a final string. Gate 7, the AI's self-healing, adaptive final layer, flashed, read, then disappeared. The screen went black. In white font, one final line appeared. Access granted. Root system compromised. Silence. Deafening. Complete. No one applauded. No one moved. Rachel closed her laptop. She hadn't even broken a sweat. Kyle turned to her, his face pale. What did you just do? Rachel looked at him, her voice calm. Your AI learns too fast. It corrects itself before it's ready. I modeled a behavior pattern from your training. Data won your system marked as benign last year. It let me in. That's not possible, he muttered. It was on page 43 of your white paper, she added. Bottom left diagram. You missed it. Someone laughed, loudly. This time the laughter wasn't at Rachel. Dr. Watanabe stood. I'd like to officially invite Ms. Rachel Evans to present a full talk at the advanced panel later this week, she said, her voice carrying authority, like thunder. The crowd broke into applause, genuine, full, rising like a wave. Rachel didn't smile. She simply unplugged her cable, packed up her laptop, and stepped down from the stage. The woman they had mocked had just rewritten the rules of the most powerful AI symposium in the country, and she had done it not with a press badge, not with a sponsor, not with credentials, but with brilliance, and no one would forget her name again. For the rest of the afternoon, the energy inside the Nexus Conference Center shifted in subtle but undeniable ways. People no longer glanced past Rachel Evans. They looked for her. She didn't linger in the spotlight. While others in her position might have basked in their sudden celebrity, Rachel quietly found a corner near the edge of the exhibit hall, sipped lukewarm coffee from a paper cup, and tried to ignore the whispers that now followed her like an echo. That's her, the woman who broke Turing 7, the one they thought was a volunteer. Conference organizers scrambled to adjust the evening's panel lineup. Journalists huddled with editors over laptops, their headlines already forming. Unknown coder exposes flaws in elite AI security system. One by one, attendees who had laughed earlier now approached Rachel's table with thin smiles and tentative compliments, their curiosity mingled with guilt. Kyle Merritt never returned to the stage that day. No apology, no explanation. Instead, his name disappeared from the closing discussion, replaced by a note on the digital board. Session canceled due to scheduling changes. Dr. Helen Watanabe, on the other hand, made no attempt to hide her enthusiasm. Within an hour of the demo, she located Rachel again, this time offering more than a handshake. "You didn't just expose a system vulnerability," she said, sitting across from her at a modest folding table in the mentor's lounge. "You demonstrated an intuitive leap no one in our lab could make, and you did it without access to our data, our resources, or even a research team." Rachel shifted, uncomfortable with the praise. "I just followed a pattern." "No," Dr. Watanabe said gently. "You saw something the rest of us were too credentialed, too distracted, or too arrogant to notice." Then, after a pause, "Have you considered joining MIT's advanced program? We can fast-track exceptional cases." Rachel blinked. "I didn't finish college." "Then maybe," the professor said, her eyes twinkling, "it's time we rethink how we define exceptional." Elsewhere, the narrative began to flip. The conference's official LinkedIn feed posted a photo of Rachel at the demo with the caption, "Innovation doesn't always wear a name tag." Startups flooded her inbox. Recruiters offered salaries that looked more like phone numbers. One venture firm even tried to schedule a meeting in the hotel lobby that same night. Rachel declined them all, because for her, this was never about a paycheck or prestige. It was about being seen, about being heard, about proving, maybe just once, that brilliance didn't need permission to exist. The next morning, she woke up to over 800 messages in her inbox. Some were offers, some were apologies, and one was from Kyle Merritt. It wasn't an apology. It was a paragraph of clipped words, passive phrasing, and thinly veiled resentment. "I'm sure you understand the complexities of public expectations. We were unprepared for an uncredentialed demo participant," followed by a vague offer to collaborate on future public-facing security showcases. Rachel read the message once, then deleted it without replying. Meanwhile, a video clip of the moment she bypassed Gate 7 had gone viral. One commentator titled it, "The 5 seconds that broke a billion-dollar ego." But Rachel knew what had really happened. She hadn't just hacked a firewall. She had hacked a room full of assumptions and rewired what it meant to belong. 2 days later, at the closing ceremony, her name was formally added to the conference's speaker registry. She stood quietly backstage, adjusting the collar of a simple gray button-down, the nicest shirt she owned. Dr. Watanabe introduced her not as a curiosity, but as a peer. Rachel Evans reminds us that intelligence doesn't always announce itself in polished packaging. That sometimes the sharpest minds work in shadows not because they lack ability, but because they've been told, over and over again, that they don't belong in the light. When Rachel stepped to the microphone, the room was silent, waiting, expecting. She didn't thank a list of companies. She didn't mention any degrees. She simply looked out over the sea of suits and screens and said, "You don't need credentials to see what's broken. You just need the courage to say so out loud." A beat, then applause. Not thunderous, not explosive, but respectful. Earned. Later that evening, as the conference wound down and suitcases rolled over marble floors, Rachel found herself walking the exhibit floor alone. The neon had dimmed. The handshakes had slowed. Yet something in her had changed permanently. She wasn't invisible anymore. She passed a kiosk displaying a looping sizzle reel of the conference's best moments. Among the clips, a frame of her at the terminal, back straight, eyes locked on the screen. Beneath it, bold white text read, "Rachel Evans, independent developer, Iowa." No title, no company, just a name, and finally the recognition it deserved. 6 months later, the email header simply read, MIT guest instructor. Confirmation Rachel Evans. Rachel stared at it for a full minute before she even clicked it open. She was sitting at her kitchen table, the same battered wooden surface. She had used to write code between shifts at the community college library. Outside, the Iowa winter pressed against the window pane. But inside, her hands were warm from the coffee she nearly spilled when she saw the subject line. Her course would begin in March. Title: Emergent Patterns in AI Systems, Intuition in Code. Format: Intensive Lab, Advanced Grad Level. Location: MIT Media Lab, Room B31, Enrollment Cap, 12 students. Waitlist: Already full. She smiled softly. The room was quiet except for the hum of her laptop and the occasional creak of the old radiator. There were no applause, no stages, no camera flashes, and yet for Rachel this felt bigger than any standing ovation. It wasn't about proving herself anymore. That part was done. Now she had something else to do. The first day she arrived on campus, she wore the same hoodie that had once gotten her mistaken for maintenance staff. This time, however, it was deliberate. The same stickered laptop rested under her arm. But now, when people saw her, they didn't look past her. They stopped to shake her hand. The room she entered was modern and spare. Polished whiteboards, dual monitor stations, and the quiet buzz of intellectual pressure. The students seated before her were some of the brightest minds in the field, recruited from elite programs across the globe, and they all knew exactly who she was. At the front of the room, Rachel set down her bag, glanced at the projector, and looked out over the students. A few nodded, one looked slightly intimidated. Another, a young woman in a Cornell sweatshirt, watched her with wide, curious eyes. Before we begin, Rachel said, I want to clarify one thing. The room quieted. I'm not here to teach you textbook definitions. I assume you know how to write code. I assume you've read more published papers than you can remember. What I want to teach you is how to look sideways, how to see what doesn't announce itself. She paused. I want to teach you the things no one teaches you, because they don't fit neatly on a syllabus. Silence, but not the skeptical kind. The kind that said, we're listening. Outside the class, buzz had already begun. Her guest lectures weren't just about hacking. They were about the limits of institutional thinking, about the blind spots in elegant theory, and about the people who never made it into the room, not because they weren't smart enough, but because someone decided they didn't look the part. One afternoon, a familiar name showed up on her enrollment audit. Kyle Merritt, not a student, but a visiting fellow, recently added to the Innovation Through Vulnerability workshop series, funded ironically by the very grant that had been awarded in part due to her Turing 7 demonstration. Rachel raised an eyebrow when she saw the roster. She hadn't spoken to him since that day. He had emailed again after the conference. A longer, more carefully worded message, but she had chosen not to reply. Now he would be sitting in the same department hallway as the woman he once mocked publicly. At the Friday colloquium, Rachel was scheduled to deliver a live demo. This time, not to prove anything, but to teach. The room was packed. More than a few faculty members stood at the back, arms crossed, curious. Rachel stood beside the podium, fingers dancing across her keyboard, describing how pattern irregularities in AI behavior can be traced not through the expected inputs but through subtle anomalies, intentional misunderstandings, as she called them. Halfway through the session, the door opened quietly. Kyle stepped in. He took a seat in the far back row, notebook in hand. His expression was unreadable. He didn't interrupt, didn't challenge, he just listened. When the session ended, people gathered near the front to ask questions. Kyle stayed seated. Rachel noticed. She packed up her laptop and made her way toward the door. As she passed his row, he stood. "Rachel." She turned. He looked uncertain. Not the arrogant speaker of months past, but a man who'd seen something in himself he hadn't liked. "I've been working with your simulation pattern from the demo," he said. "You were right. About the loop behavior. We implemented a fix using your approach." Rachel studied him, waiting. "I also wanted to say thank you," he added, "for exposing it before something worse happened." Rachel nodded slowly. "It's not me you should thank," she said. "It's every overlooked mind who saw what you didn't and never got invited to the room." Kyle looked down. "I'm trying to do better," he said quietly. "Then keep showing up," she replied, "and maybe try listening this time." She didn't say it with malice, only truth. He nodded, and she walked away. Later that evening, Rachel stood alone in the lab where she taught. The room was empty now, quiet again. But on the whiteboard, scrawled in marker, was something a student had left behind. A note that simply read, "Thank you for seeing what no one else did. In the code. In us." Rachel smiled. Once they had laughed at her for not having credentials. Now she was shaping the minds of those who would define the future. She hadn't just earned a seat at the table. She'd built a new one and left the door open behind her. 1 year after the day she hacked the system live on stage, the name Rachel Evans no longer raised eyebrows. It commanded attention. It was printed in bold across speaker invitations, scientific journals, and etched into the frosted glass door of a newly launched innovation center. Not in Silicon Valley, but in a quiet corner of Iowa. EVA Institute, empowering vision through access. Rachel didn't build it for headlines. She built it for the people like her. People with brilliant minds, quiet voices, and no fancy credentials. Just fire in their hearts and code on their fingertips. The EVA Institute wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. There were no glass walls, no investor cocktail hours, no marble floors. Just laptops, whiteboards, and open doors. Here, students didn't need resumes. They needed curiosity. They didn't need letters of recommendation. Just the courage to keep learning after being told they don't belong. One morning, Rachel walked into the main lab carrying a stack of notebooks and 2 bagels. On the board was a new prompt. Detecting subtle bias in machine learning models. "Who sees the flaw?" she asked the class. A girl in the front row raised her hand. Brown braids, an oversized hoodie, and eyes sharp as blades. "The model's overfitting to legacy patterns," she said. "It's ignoring emerging linguistic context." Rachel smiled. "Excellent, Morgan. You just spotted what a paid team of consultants missed for 3 months." She didn't say it to flatter. She said it because it was true, and because Morgan, who had been rejected from 3 elite internships for lack of polish, needed to hear that her mind was more than enough. During a short break, Rachel paused by the observation window of another room. Inside, a team of students were huddled around a project for accessible AI, a tool to help visually impaired users navigate digital spaces using adaptive interfaces. One of them was Caleb, once told he wasn't focused enough to handle Jam. Now he was leading a team. Rachel watched quietly. She didn't need applause. Every time someone like Caleb found their voice, every time someone like Morgan dared to raise their hand, that was her reward, that was the mission. That evening, after everyone had left, Rachel remained alone in the dim light of the office. The hum of distant monitors echoed softly down the hall. On the wall behind her was a framed photograph. It showed her, 1 year earlier, standing in front of the Turing 7 system, bathed in the faint blue glow of the screen, back straight, eyes focused, while the crowd behind her held their collective breath. She used to think that was the moment that changed her life. It wasn't. The moment that truly mattered was quieter. It happened years before, when she stayed up late writing code on a second-hand laptop while working 3 jobs, when she taught herself algorithms because no school would give her a seat, when she showed up again and again, even when no one thought she belonged, and when the world finally did see her. She didn't use that spotlight to seek revenge. She used it to hold the door open, not to break the system, but to rewrite it, one student, one line of code, one dismissed dream at a time. Now, when people say Rachel Evans, they no longer picture the woman in the back of the room, the one in a hoodie with no credentials. They see a founder, a teacher, a systems thinker, a woman who didn't just win the game. She built a new one and made sure it didn't require a gold-plated invitation to play. You've just witnessed the remarkable story of Rachel Evans, a simple woman with no credentials, no elite background, who was turned away from one of the most powerful AI symposiums, until she stepped on stage and silenced the room with a single line of code. She didn't just hack a system everyone thought was unbreakable. She hacked the assumptions we all carry about who's allowed to be brilliant, who deserves a seat at the table, and who gets left behind. And most importantly, she opened a door for every overlooked mind, the ones who never looked the part, but had everything it took to lead. If you've ever been dismissed, underestimated, or told you're not good enough because you didn't have the right degree, the right title, or the right look, remember Rachel. She didn't wait to be invited into the room. She walked in and rewrote the rules. Something to think about. In a world obsessed with resumes and appearances, who might you be overlooking? And if you're the one outside the door, how will you choose to step in? Now it's your turn. Have you ever been underestimated? Share your story in the comments. We read every single one. Send this video to someone who needs the courage to keep going. And if you believe that intelligence and worth aren't worn like name tags, hit subscribe so you don't miss the stories we tell next. We are the Worthy Stories, where ordinary people prove extraordinary truths. See you in the next video. And remember, sometimes the quietest woman in the room is the one rewriting its future.